Fueling right. Why do we want to get our fueling right? Well, for many reasons. One, it is part of the main reasons why people DNF ultramarathons. And number two, we're going to run through tonight essentially how the body stores and burns energy. So you know the fundamentals, the essential laws of fueling, and then fueling strategies. Okay, so feel free, if you're joining the call tonight, to drop any questions that you have throughout the call in the chat, which is the little box bottom right with some little lines in it. There's Q&A at the end, and I'll make sure we go through those. Right, click a mouse. Fueling. A top reason why people DNF ultra marathons. So they've done some studies on this across some big races where they had over 700 essentially research participants, and they looked at all the reasons why people DNF. Those top two reasons, one was fueling, one was training. Okay, so if we get this right, it will put you in the top 70%. Yet it is also something that's deeply personal for people, and everybody's bodies are different, and it takes time to build, what would I call it? It's resilience, it's proficiency, it's skill, it's like reflexes almost as well in the body. It's quite a complex piece because fueling interacts with your breathing, with your speed, with your stomach, with how you feel, and then obviously your energy levels. So if you can't fuel, you are probably in trouble during your race, especially when we are going ultra for multiple hours. So to get us started, type 1 in the chat if you are ready to get started and go tonight and learn about fueling. Wicked. Upcoming webinars, training plans, 3-month training plan. We had that webinar last week. Fuel right, avoid DNF. That is today. Strength and mobility. Should I stretch? That'll be next week this time. And breathing, how to not get gassed on hills. That will be the week following. Alrighty, so let's have a look at what some of the pros do. I was looking for a video about ultra fueling. There's lots of things, but nothing was quite as good as this, okay? And this is obviously Eliud Kipchoge, who's a very fast marathon runner, but he exemplifies the principle of fueling whilst running long, albeit on the streets, and relatively flat or even somewhat downhill if you're running the Berlin Marathon. So I'm going to play this at 2 times speed and just take note how many times he fuels throughout this 40K stretch, okay? And remember, he's doing it in about 2 hours, okay? Alrighty. So that, does anyone have any guesses as to how many times, or were they counting throughout the video, how many times he fueled or attempted to fuel throughout that race? Any guesses? Jen, anything?
I think it was about 9 or 10, I think.
Right, it was pretty up there. It was
Yeah.
actually 12 times.
12.
Okay. So what we often think about and see in someone that runs a very fast marathon is, wow, they're just lightning quick. And they run a 2-hour marathon, but we never actually look at, like, what did he do during it? Okay. And so he fueled 12 times. On the last one, his drinks man wasn't there for whatever reason. But that's a lot. Okay. And all of that is because he understands that he's burning calories, burning carbohydrates, using sodium in his body and fluid. And to keep propelling him at that intensity for that duration, he needs to keep fueling as he goes. Okay. And that's really important for, obviously, one, we'll understand this soon, but going beyond just the energy stores within our body. And then two, it's actually really important for recovery afterwards as well. So instead of fully drawing down the body's energy stores for one race or one training run and then having to, like, really bring the body's energy all the way back up, if we fuel throughout, the dips are smaller and the body's not having to, like, recharge and fully restock the whole silo or stockpile, restock the pantry of energy and fuel after our run. Okay. And so it's just as important during and then for after, so that we can train some more, or you just don't feel like death after running a maybe 2-hour, 1 minute marathon. So it's a really neat video, I think. And he's obviously fortunate enough to have a waterman on a bicycle riding ahead and placing a bottle with an electrolyte mix or whatever special tonics they are cranking in those drinks. I'm sure they have very high strength, so that he's fueled up as he's going. Now, as ultra runners, we don't obviously have the luxury of a cyclist going ahead. Yes, we do have aid stations, but to be able to fuel at that velocity as we're going, we often have our vests, which have our fuel in it. We carry it with us, which enables us to do that. Okay, so let me... Does that let me go to the next video? Oh no. Here we go. That's what I want. Alrighty. So running is like a car. When you are going 40 kilometers, you need fuel to go 40 kilometers. Okay. So this is a quote that I picked up on another clip by Patrick Sang, who's one of the coaches at his running team. Essentially, I thought this analogy was just really beautiful to understand. Our bodies are no different, right? We have to fuel them to go distance. Even though 40 Ks to a car isn't much, you still can't run a car with no gas. And if you only put just enough fuel in for 40 kilometers, you're gonna have to, like, take a lot of time to refill that tank right the way back up after, just getting to the gas station. So we don't want to put our bodies in that situation during training and during racing. This here is a clip as a bit of an insight. This was off my Instagram from a wee while ago. Maybe about a year ago, I did a 50K ultra unassisted around, like, the base of a volcano here in New Zealand. which is about 50 Ks. I think it might have had 3,000 vert. And this is just an insight into some of the fuels that I took with me for what I thought at the time was an estimated 8 to 9 hour day. It ended up being a little bit longer, like 11, I think. And so you'll get a gauge of sort of how much we might need to consume, or some of the types or styles of foods and nutritions that you can take whilst going along.
What have I prepared for an unassisted 50 kilometer today? We've got a couple of gels to support, got some ginger for emergency, a couple of bars and blocks. We've got a tailwind when I fuel up with some water around the course. There's 6 huts going around Mount Taranaki, so I should be able to fill up some water at one of them. Got some Creepers socks, range of bars, 1 square meals, some dates, they're always awesome, thermal neck warmer, sunnies, rain jacket, windbreaker, hat with a flap, booby vest, 1 litre capacity. Should give me plenty of flexibility throughout the day, keep me safe, keep me warm, keep me dry, keep me fueled. We'll see how it goes.
Alrighty. So that's an example of some of the fuels that I packed and carried in my vest with me to go that distance. And there's a mixture there of all sorts. We've got natural foods, we've got solid foods, we've got electrolytes, we've got water capacity, and as you can also probably tell, like a real range of flavors. Okay. And that's important because when you're doing hard things, your body can do weird things, like go off flavors, for instance, of certain foods or bars or electrolytes. And so variety can be a useful tactic as well. And I would recommend that you experiment with a lot of variety on different products in your body as you're running and you're training, most importantly, and not to use anything that you haven't experimented with on a training run, on racing runs, or if you're pushing to do bigger distances or things that you haven't done before. Okay, so that's an example of what I would take on an unassisted 50. And hydration. Okay, this is just in essence a general rule that, again, this is from like a lot of different, what's the words I'm looking for? Like sources or experts in ultra running. They've, you know, if you read up on it, there's all sorts of interesting stuff around. Back in the day, they used to have almost health officials that would mandate athletes had to consume X volume of water per kilometers or hours or things like that. And so they've now since tested it all out and tried to understand, you know, what's the optimum hydration rules. Well, really, 2 things. One, everybody's body's different, okay, in terms of how much you sweat. Okay, which is one. Then there's what type of sweater you are. Are you a salty sweater or a non-salty sweater? These things are all dependent on body type, hormones, diet, all sorts of things. Okay, like the body is so complex. And so this rule of thumb is the one that I stick to throughout my training and my racing.
Whilst on trail is dead simple. Drink when you are thirsty. Easy, huh? Why so simple? Because running, especially over longer distances, is a very complex equation. You got how long you're going for, how many kilometers, how much vertical, what type of breathing that you do. The list goes on. How efficient you are at running, at moving in your body, how efficient you are at processing carbohydrates, salts, fats, how efficient your body is at getting energy to where it's needed. The list goes on. So my rule for hydration that I follow,
Okay,
what
is
type of breathing that you do.
to drink whilst you are thirsty. Okay, so it keeps it really simple, and that's even just the thought of thirst. Or if I think I should take a drink, that means take a drink. Okay, so that your body's never questioning whether or not I need fluids in this moment. Like if I eat a solid bar or something, I'm like, whoa, I'm halfway through, I should keep eating. I'm like, nah, my mouth's getting dry, take a drink, right? Just pause on the eating for a little bit. Really critical, just acknowledge what your body needs and just keep it giving it what it needs, okay? And drink when it's thirsty. And that doesn't mean like guzzling water. It's like lots of infrequent small sips, much more effective than massive overloads and then periods of nothing, okay? So that is essentially rule of thumb for hydration. Let's dive into some more technicalities, okay, on fueling. Top 2 reasons why ultra runners DNF. Number 1, gastrointestinal issues. Number 2, training types, specificity, enough, not enough, wrong terrain, things like that. On average, the body stores 2,000 calories of carbohydrates. Okay, so in sort of any general given day, our body stores about 2,000 calories of carbohydrates. If you, yes, try and carbo load more, the body can, up those stores a little bit in different places and different parts and different ways. But on average, you can't like all of a sudden just have like a store of like 10,000 calories of carbohydrates. It just doesn't work like that. And you can't just like build it up. This is just sort of the natural homeostasis limit that the body has on board at any time, or else if they'd have figured out how not to need this, you could probably inject yourself with something and not need to eat for a week, maybe, okay? That's why we need to always be constantly consuming new, fresh food in our bodies, okay? And now, surprisingly, our body stores on average 70,000 calories of fat, okay? And that's even for someone that's like a really fit runner that's, even like my build, right? Like thin, not really like that much to me. I still have about 70,000 calories of fat in my body, okay? And so that is like, what's that? 35 times the amount fat stored in our body than carbohydrates, okay? And now we're going to explore how the body burns fuel and when it can or can't do different types of fuel sources due to intensity in our running and our endurance event, okay? So keep those 2 points in mind. Fuel burning, okay? So when we are, say, walking, or let's just call it more sedentary, right? This is a spectrum. And our fuel burn ratio on that left-hand side is predominantly fat-oriented, okay? So at, watching this webinar, your body's probably sitting in a seat. It's probably quite calm. It's probably doing a little bit of mental processing, but due to the low intensity, the body's able to efficiently, aerobically, so with oxygen, metabolize the fat, okay? Keep the carbohydrate stores, relatively at bay, and just be utilizing that to generate our energy, okay? So at the lowest resting state, dominantly fat, some carbohydrates, right? Now, as we say, walk around a bit faster, we might be moving between busy office blocks in a city, or we might be jogging, right? And that intensity starts lifting in the body, okay? The sliding scale in the ratio starts shifting out of fat burning efficiency into more carbohydrate burning volume, okay? And so remember, we've got 70,000 calories of fat on the left, and we've only got 2,000 calories of carbohydrates on the right, okay? So I think the ratios, don't quote me on this, but I think when we hit about 60% of our VO2 max, we're already starting to tip past the 50-50, well past 50-50 carbohydrate fat burning ratio, okay? And so that means pretty much as soon as we start running at some intensity, right? If we're up into like zone 3+ for sure, we'll be burning a lot more calories of carbohydrates than fat, because the body has some amazing calculator that goes, it is too inefficient right now to keep moving at the speed you're moving, and to do that via fat, I'm going to do that via carbohydrates, okay? And then when we get into, you know, pushing it, right, this might be hill intensity, upward of zone 3, we're in pretty much full carbohydrate mode, and the body will be essentially burning fuel anaerobically. So that means without oxygen, okay? And that's when the body can just break down those carbohydrates and generate energy in the cells to keep you moving. But remember, out of the, say, 72,000 calorie bank of energy, there's only 2,000 calories of carbohydrates. Now, in an average person or runner, you can get away with those 2,000 calories of carbohydrates and burning them at a relative intensity for about an hour to an hour and a half, okay? And so conveniently, lots of like social sports are like an hour and a half long. So you can turn up to football, rugby, you know, netball, sports that are probably social sports or team sports, and play for an hour and a half. You know, it might be squash, it could be tennis, and you'll be wasted at the end of it and really tired. You might have had some oranges at halftime. That's a good benefit. You're topping up the tank. But if you don't, you're essentially just drawing down that carbohydrate store and relying on that for energy. It will probably take you a big feed in like the rest of the afternoon to get back on top after that match, okay? And so whenever we're running, I encourage, especially for ultras, people to train like you race, okay? So practice your fueling as you're training. And if you're doing pretty much any run beyond an hour or hour and a half, definitely you need to be fueling, or else it'll take you longer to recover. And your time between recovery and training impacts how much you can train, impacts the quality of your training. And then obviously if we need to be able to run 50 Ks or 100 Ks, we need a good amount of time to be able to do that, okay? So those are a bit of the mechanics of how the body burns fuel at different intensities of exercises in a very simplistic way. And I hope that that's just a really simple visual to think about when you're moving. Is my body, and you don't what am I looking for? You don't know, like, there's no like sign or signal or measurement that's like, your body is currently burning 50% fat right now. That'd be quite a cool feature, actually. They might be able to do that with the watches based on intensity, but that's pretty much, you've got to think about the laws at the moment for this, for fueling and running. Fuel sources, let's explore some of these. Carbohydrates, bars, gels, drinks, electrolytes, fruits, and lollies. Right, these are examples of usually carbohydrate-rich fuel sources. Sodium. You can get sodium from bars, gels, drinks, electrolytes, fruits, and lollies. Fun facts about carbohydrates and sodium is you can't get carbohydrates and sodium into the body without water, and you can't get water into the body without sodium or carbohydrates. So if you just have lots of water, right, water only for your whole run, your body will have to mine extra carbohydrates or sodium to get that water into your system, okay, from somewhere in the body. If it needs more water, if you have the water without carbohydrates or sodium, and if you have lots of carbohydrates but no water, right, you're going to need some sodium and some water to get the carbohydrates on board, or else the body won't process it and give you more energy to keep going as well. So it's almost like a triangle between carbs, sodium, and water, and all three are needed to help each other within the system. Okay. Fuel sources, fat, more so in traditional diet whole foods, less so in the sources listed above. Okay, so in a lot of the performance nutrition products, they will often be very low or no fat, okay? And the reason is that when we're running long or intensity over a period of time, if we have too much fat, it'll actually confuse the gut and it'll deprioritize processing that food because it doesn't need fat right now. And so I actually experienced this on the UTA 50. There was a muesli bar that I had trained with, and it was very nut based, like very natural, very nut rich. And nuts actually have a very high fat content. And I'd sort of realized that on the back of the packet, and I was like, I'll test it out on a training run. And I can't remember how long the training run was, but I definitely remember having that bar maybe in like the last half hour of the training run. And yeah, it went down all good and that felt fine, but I stopped and then carried on with my day. So then I was like, oh, the flavor was good. And like, it was a little bit different to the sweet stuff. So I was like, okay, that might be good for my race day. I'll select one of those into my race kit. And I had it probably 30 kilometers in, and it locked up my stomach because I still had like another, say, 2 hours of running left, and I didn't experience that high fat bar in that situation in training, and so it caught me out. And so I had to try other fuel sources or things to get more fuels on. I think snakes at the next aid station was definitely my number one on that day, but fat when racing isn't preferential. Okay, so that's good to note. Protein, more so in traditional diet whole foods and supplements, less so in the sources listed above. Okay, protein, unless you're doing, I don't know, say maybe more than 12 hours. Yeah, more than 12 hours, or if you're upwards, you know, a long 85K, long 100K, if you're heading towards miler, there is some insights around keeping on a bit of protein and as you're going. But for the shorter stuff, I'd say if you're just doing anything 50 to 100K, real simple for now. Don't focus on consuming protein or fat or worrying about those things really when doing 50 or 100Ks, and just keep your focus on adequate protein outside of the training runs in your day-to-day as like a whole body volume. And we'll go over some data on that soon, but that's the sort of lowdown on protein for pretty much outside of training, not on training runs, if that makes sense. Fueling chart. Okay, this is the magic chart that I'll encourage you to laser into your brain. I first wrote up these numbers on like the back of a little, like, I don't know, I must have got sent like a So like an aid station box with, I don't know, brought some gels and things, and then I wrote in vivid on the top like the laws of fueling, essentially, right? Okay, and so every time that I went to, pack a little kit for a training run, I'd like do some mental calculations based on these parameters. So I'd go, okay, great. This is what I need to do today to, this is the length and this is about the time. And if I pack this much, I should be right. Okay. And so that's how I got started. Carbohydrates. Okay. Target range, okay, is 60 to 90 grams per hour. Okay. Now, if you're just starting off with fueling, notice these are ranges. Okay. So 90 grams of carbs per hour is like real elite. Okay. And so you've probably had like maybe a year or two of practice. Like it definitely took me, probably like a solid 2 years to get up into that range of being able to fuel at that rate in my body. And it took a lot of training and a lot of running and a lot of practicing and figuring out different fuel sources and timings and things like that, timing and type, to be able to start hitting that upwards 90 grams per hour range. Okay, but if you're just starting out and you're looking to get some fuel on board, 60 grams per hour, okay? And we'll cover some back of packet stuff in a bit, but that's how you've got to start thinking about quantifying, okay? Carbohydrates. Calories. Rule of thumb is 200 to 400 calories per hour, okay? So not all carbohydrates are created equal. Caloric indication is another metric that you can use for that. And again, these are all things just to help. Again, that's a range. More elite, you'd be looking at 400 calories. Again, just can you get to 200? Okay, these are like just baseline numbers of like inputs when you're doing a lot of output. Sodium. That's actually wrong. I'll have to change that. But 600 to 800 milligrams, I should say, per liter. Okay, this is per liter. Okay, now, like we said, drink when you're thirsty. And so if you fill up both flasks in your vest, right, one with electrolytes, one with water. The electrolytes, you'd want to make sure that you're probably getting, 600 milligrams in one of those bottles. And you've also got to remember that if you're consuming other extra carbohydrate sources, they will be contributing to sodium as well. So keep an eye on that and those levels as you are training and preparing as well. Okay, so 600 to 800 milligrams per liter. Water. Drink when thirsty as required. We've discussed that. Fat, less than 30 grams per hour. Okay, so over 30 grams per hour is quite a bit of fat, and the body will probably start locking up. That's been my experience. And there's data around that backs that up as well. Protein, again, data out there. This is about the range per day, 1.4 to 2.1 grams per kilo of body weight per day. Okay, so let's say per kg per day. So if I'm 70 kilos and I was targeting 2 grams per kilo per day, that would be 140 grams of protein per day. Okay. So obviously if you're running lots, you'd be at this spectrum. If you're running a little bit, you'd be down here. Okay. So that is essentially the fueling chart for our training. The core ones that we look at are those top 3. Okay. We get this one and then avoid going over that one and then monitor this one throughout our day-to-day. Okay. So that there is something, just an amazing tool to get dialed in for your training runs and then also for when planning your race kit as well. Reading labels. This is an example of a It's called an engineered nutritional food product for ultra running. These are actually quite good, actually. I do rate these if you can get your hands on them. There's a range of different flavors, and they're quite good, actually. Not affiliated in any way, but the Pro Meal bars are pretty good. So they're quite big. And so this is an example on the back of them what their nutritional facts look like. Okay, so these are quite big bars. So what they've actually done is a serving size here is half a bar, so half of one of those. So if you're running along and you have half of it, this is how much you know you've had. And if you've had the whole thing, that's how much you know you've had, okay? So remember, we were talking about 200 to 400 calories per hour. So if I was flying and my nutrition was really good, I could have this whole bar in that hour, and I'd know that my calorie level would be like pretty upper limit. I'd be in pretty good form, okay? Total fat, less than 30 grams. Yep, if I had half of it, I'd only be 11 grams. If I had the whole thing, I'd be at 22 grams. Cool, thumbs up. Sodium, okay, so if I just had half the bar, I'd have 75 milligrams, and if I had the whole bar, I'd be at 150 milligrams, okay? So you've just got to keep that in mind for whatever else you're mixing into your electrolyte drinks and how much water you're drinking as you go. Total carbohydrates, okay, so if I had half the bar, the range for the carbohydrates was 60 to 90 grams per hour. If I had half the bar, it would be a third of my carbohydrates, okay? And if I had the whole bar, would be getting to 2/3 of that 60 grams, okay? So it's a pretty solid whack. And obviously the protein, there's a little bit of protein in there. That's all good. That's how you interpret the back of a packet, okay? So any muesli bars, things like this, they'll all have it. This is actually the American labeling system, and I think it's actually great. The Australian and New Zealand ones, for example, are just a little bit more confusing, not quite as simple. Americans love calories, so it's always really clear and simple. So I rate the American system. Here's another example. This is a Tailwind single serve sachet. So Tailwind is an electrolyte drink mix. You would mix one of these, pour, shake, go, mix with 590 to 710 mils of water and fuel your adventure. So normally I'd put one of these sachets in one bottle, okay, and then alternate sip one for one as I'm going, water, electrolyte, because rule of thumb, you don't want to mix double electrolyte in only your water source, because if you go off the flavor of the electrolyte, you've run out of water fluid source, and you can still always get carbohydrates. You can still always get sodium and calories from solid foods if your body's rejecting the flavor of the electrolyte, and it does happen. Okay, so this again, back of the packet. So if we were to have half a Pro Meal bar and one of these, it would be 200 calories, right? So if we smash the whole flask of Tailwind and probably most of the other bottle of water, we'd have 200 calories. We have zero fat, 630 milligrams of sodium. Okay, so that range of 600 to 800 milligrams of sodium per liter. So if we had half the bar, a liter of water would have 630 milligrams plus sodium, 75. So it'd be at 705 milligrams of sodium. We're pretty in a good range, okay? And then carbs, 50 grams, so half a bar, 22, and 50 grams, a whole Tailwind sachet, you are at 72 grams. So you're within the 60 to 90 grams of carbs. That's a pretty banging fueling ratio, okay? So if you had a whole Tailwind, half a Pro Meal bar, that would be a great example of 1 hour of nutrition whilst doing your trail run, okay? And then you've obviously got to keep that up for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, 12, 13, 14, insert length of time here, okay? But that will keep your body in a really sharp, engaged, active, energy restoring state, so you can keep going, okay? Fueling strategies. Set timers, e.g. 45 minutes, 35 minutes, 25 minutes, progressively decrease the time with increased experience. Okay, so I think when I started out, I would do like every 45 minutes, I'd have a gel, and then obviously it would go off again at 45 minutes, which would be an hour and a half, and another one, and then so forth. Or I'd have a muesli bar and then a gel, and I'd alternate them. Okay, just really good. It's one less thing you have to worry about, okay? Whilst you're dodging tree roots and your head's down and you're trying to navigate and you're following some markers and it's dark and you got a headlight on and you're thirsty and then you've forgotten about having a snack, okay? Having some solid food. Just set an alarm, and every time it goes off, like, it's just a good reminder, like, oh, I've got to keep consuming, okay? And really try to just consume something, even if you don't really feel like it, because if you keep missing, that energy debt is one of the hardest places to get out of. And then you end up in that DNF territory for gastrointestinal, either because you can't get any more foods on board and everything's shut down, locked up, or it's just too far to get you back out of essentially the deficit. And you'll have no energy left, and your body will essentially start saying, hold on, we're not going any further. Okay, and you'll probably get to an aid station and not want to get up. Okay, that's what happens when we miss fueling consistently and regularly. Okay, both for training and for racing. Solids, an example of some solids. We've sort of been talking a little bit about this, right? 1 solid bar, 1 gel per hour. Gels, again, look at the back of the packet. Gels are usually 25 to 50 grams per gel of carbohydrate sort of thing. So that might give you, that combo might give you 300 cal, 57 grams of carbs, 175 milligrams of sodium, right? That's obviously no fluids in there, no electrolytes. So again, if you were to have 30-minute timer, right, and you had 1 solid bar and 1 gel, that's the input volume that you'd be having. Okay, and these are just all things that you've got to experience and experiment with in your body. Okay. Gels, example again, gel plus electrolyte might be 300 cal, but you might get more carbs, and then you've obviously got higher sodium, which will match your water intake. So these are all things you've just got to balance, okay, as you're putting together a training set of fuel and as you are putting together a race day pack as well. Okay, so it's quite simple maths, but you've got to do some numbers, okay? Naturals, bananas are great 15 minutes before. This is probably just more a broader point around fuel before you set off, okay? Because it usually takes about 15 minutes for, once you finish consuming that food, it takes 15 minutes for it to go into the gut. And then it's a process called gastric emptying, which then essentially the gut says, okay, I've done my job of breaking everything down. I'm going to open the hatch and let it down the system so that it then can absorb through the intestines, large and small. That's why fueling before you start your run is important, so you're already not playing catch up, essentially, okay? And bananas are great and simple to have in the house. Like, even if I go for a run first thing in the morning, I'll wake up and one of the first things I do, I'll just have a banana. It's a really good, just simple practice to just get ahead of the curve for your day and start fueling right from the get-go. Okay. Dates, pack a punch, carbs, and a low GI. So GI, glycemic index, they are slow releasing. So they're really solid for long runs, I find. And they're really good at just lining the stomach as well, because they're a little bit more fibrous than most foods. So it actually makes the, I'd say it's very, when we're running long, right, we're not Eliud Kipchoge, we're not running super boosty speeds. It helps line, that intestinal wall. It supports the sugars to get to the right stage of the intestines. That's where solid foods can be really advantageous when we are fueling longer. Savory reset, sweet savory receptivity. One of my favorites is Goo Stroop Waffle, the Salties Caramel, or Kumara Quinoa Miso Black Bean Patties. I make those myself. In essence, a lot of the nutrition that we are aiming to consume is often quite sweet oriented because of the carbohydrates, because of the calories, and so it's often you can go off the sweet. And so if you can find some like savory things that just sort of zap your body out of sweet mode, it's really great. So those are two things that I've found to, reset that sweet savory receptivity, and then that can get you back on for things like having more electrolytes, for instance. Count your long runs. Okay, so this here is an example of me taking a photo of some used a solid bar that scrunched up on the far left. Snap lock bag probably had some dates in it, maybe. Might had some bliss balls in it. And then there's a gel. I like those Huma Chia energy gels. They're really natural and they're quite nice. Easy on the stomach. And then had 2 tailwinds by the looks of that, whatever I was doing. If you obviously always set out with a plan, but then always retrospectively, if you can, on training, especially long runs, count back and see actually what did you do per hour? Where were you at? And it also often surprises you, like, whoa, I had like nothing. And yeah, I feel like crap afterwards. It's like, yeah, you probably just didn't fuel well. Or your body's really sore the next day. Again, it's probably like a big fueling challenge. So start experimenting, see where you're at, and then start counting and reflecting. That's another one, for instance. It was, like a whole bag of party mix, heaps of gels, all sorts of stuff going on there. Write it down. What I also often do is, if I have these little snap lock bags, which might often have like ginger or dates or things like that in it, I'll just take these and I'll put them back in the snap lock bag, and I'll just write on the bag the run, the distance, and the vert, and then I'll just write down, it might be like 30K, 1,000 vert, 50 calories per hour, and sodium, whatever that was, and then I'll just usually have like a little, it's like a bin box almost. And next time I go for 30K run, I'll go, oh, what did I have again? I felt great or I felt crap. And it'll just remind you of like, oh, okay, I've definitely got to do more. Or, oh, actually last time I did a 30K, I had these 3 things and I felt awesome. Like, could you do it again, right? Try out that combo again. They are good ways to test and experiment, because everybody's body is different. Getting the fundamentals down. Join the team on Strava. You can join us on Strava. It's awesome to see where everyone's running all around the world. Learn how to not DNF in the community, in the classroom. There's an awesome lecture that goes into more detail about that. Set your goals and know your why. There is a lecture in the classroom about that. Training plans 50K and 100K, the only 4 runs you ever need in the classroom for you to learn. Now, tonight, as you're live on the webinar, you can unlock the Ultra Training Essentials, or if you are watching this and you're a level 2 on the recording and you've made it this far and you want to unlock the Ultra Training Essentials, feel free to DM me Ultra Training Essentials and just quote what video you've watched, and I'll unlock that for you in the classroom. Okay, as part of the Ultra Roadmap, hopefully by now you've selected your race and shared your why. You've joined the Skeletal Freedom Strava Club. You are registered, or you have, or are currently watching the webinar, and you'll be unlocking the Ultra Essentials right now. Learn about the top 2 reasons why people DNF. Go through the Ultra Planning Masterclass. Feel free to book a free training plan review call with me. It's 30 minutes. My time will go through all of the things, make sure you've got the right context, fueling on lock, you've got a plan, and you're ready to go ultra. If you do all those things, you get another bonus training module. So it's a win-win-win.